And Chuck, let's talk about this, because when you talk about battlegrounds, Minnesota is certainly not battleground. It usually goes Democratic, even went that way in 1972 when nothing else did. But it's adjacent to the media market in Wisconsin, which certainly is a swing state. But I was talking to two battleground former governors last night, and together they were saying that Walz would be the do no harm, take no risks. That Josh Shapiro would be a home run. They both preferred him because they thought he was more of a fighter, that he was, to quote one, a really great political animal, which is, from politicians, that's praise.
If you're Harris.
That's high praise for Josh Shapiro. But they're saying that this was the less risky choice.
Well, that's what I'm taking away from this. It is not lost on me that there was a labor campaign against Kelly. Mark Kelly in Arizona, labor questioning some of his bona fides on that issue. There was a quiet progressive campaign. Fetterman ended up going public, being against Shapiro. You had the voucher issue. If most delegates at the Democratic National Convention usually have a relationship with one of the teachers' unions, so that isn't something that Shapiro,
And Walz is a teacher.
And look, she's the leader of the Democratic Party right now. And if you told me her calculation is, look, I don't want any new dust-ups inside the party. We've got to be as united as we can. So if you looked at your three candidates that way, right, look, if she had picked Kelly, it would have been an acknowledgement that she's got a border problem, and this is a way to lean into it. With Shapiro, I think picking Shapiro, it would be seen as a strategic pick. Most presidents learn over time that the best way to pick a vice president is for somebody you're personally comfortable with, is somebody that shares your philosophy. And I think Tim Walz won this. I think in hindsight, there's not a long history of Walz and Harris having a personal relationship. I think Walz won this on TV. I think Walz was able to show that he can do the things that you need a running mate to do. Go on the attack, keep your opponents on their feet, but translate your governing style to a different constituency. Look, I like to say, sometimes people speak Washington and sometimes people speak American. Tim Walz speaks American, He's not going to tell you about a subcommittee chair. He's not going to tell you about, I have a feeling he won't talk about the Veterans Committee. He'll talk about just helping veterans and things like that. So in that sense, it strikes me that's what Harris is looking for. But it does tell me, I'm wondering, I have a yellow flag in my head going, if you squeal loud enough, she hears and responds. There is going to be people that will come away from this experience thinking, the progressive backlash is what got her off of Shapiro or what got her off of Kelly. In fairness, maybe they didn't vet either. Okay, that's also a possibility when all's said and done. But on substance, that I can't help but have that takeaway.
And the choice, Susan, it would have been a gimme putt for Pennsylvania. He's, so wildly popular in Pennsylvania. So that was something that would have certainly been in the bag, except for the fact that the sitting senator, John Fetterman, and they've got another Senate race that could end up being very competitive because it's so well financed from the Republican side, with Bob Casey, the veteran, very, very popular, but up against David McCormick. So you don't want more dissension there. There was also, in terms of a very public push by some women's groups. So there were a number of groups who didn't like something that happened with one of Shapiro's close advisors, that they felt he had not been aggressive enough on. And then you have to wonder whether this last push by Netanyahu, which I covered so intensively in the last few weeks when he was here, the tough speech, not embracing the hostage release deal, the ceasefire deal, and then not only one assassination, which was fairly understandable, but the one deep in the heart of Tehran, which is now likely setting off a whole other cycle of retaliation from Iran. Did Bibi Netanyahu partly scuttle Josh Shapiro?
If the Democrats lose Pennsylvania and then lose the presidency as a result, there'll be a lot of second guessing about this decision. On the other hand, Tim Walz is the opposite of weird. Like in a dictionary, if you had weird and anti-weird, you'd have Tim Walz's picture there as a high school coach and a history teacher and a guy that just seems as normal as can be. I also wonder if Vice President Harris was affected by her own difficult, fractious relationship with Joe Biden in the early years of their presidency, of their administration, and that she didn't want that. And maybe in hindsight, that'll turn out to be a great decision if Tim Walz is appealing to rural Americans and gets some swing and even Republican votes that maybe they wouldn't have gotten with Shapiro on the ticket. So remains to be seen. But I think often you're fighting the last war. And that was, for Kamala Harris, the last war.
Because it took a long time for them to warm up, especially reportedly the East Wing not warming up to her as well, because of some of the shots she took at Joe Biden when they were running against each other, particularly that Miami debate that we all did.
Look, I do think we know Shapiro's very ambitious, and if she had a fear that her running mate, if they didn't share some of the same philosophies, she's picking somebody from a different wing of the party. Are they going to worry about their own brand over and above the ticket or the administration? And I think when you look at that, and if you're in her head, I can see why she goes with Walz, because she goes, we're in the same lane of the Democratic Party. I said this earlier, Tim Walz is basically younger Joe Biden.